This is Podcast Satellite. This is Prince Handley coming to you with 100,000 watts of pure love. We're going to give you some good news today for enlightened people, suggestions for Israel's military and her government, prophecies currently being fulfilled today. I've got some good stocks that look good to me anyway. I'm going to tell you about some important information also on the energy sector that you need to be aware of. U.S. stocks ended higher Friday with a more positive assessment of Federal Reserve commentary on the economy and a good drop in the oil price. Actually, the outlook on the economy, the interest rates, and the inflation has not changed much. Inflation's under control, growth's perking along, not accelerating on the downside, and interest rates are a little soft. Friday's gains helped the market recoup some of the losses sparked earlier in the week. Now, about other markets. Crude futures ended at a 5-month low under $67 a barrel. The U.S. dollar traded at a 6-week high against the euro and also scored gains against the Japanese yen. Gold futures ended lower, down 2.4% for the week. Gold's sharp sell-off can be attributed to a failure once again to the rise above that key resistance at $640. Inflation is something that we're all interested in. It doesn't matter what country you live in. Anchoring inflation expectations is vital because if people begin to expect higher prices, then they're going to alter the way they invest. And concerning oil, on Wednesday, Royal Dutch Shell's Shell Exploration and Production Company announced that its Mars Tension Leg platform, the one that was heavily damaged during Hurricane Katrina last year, is producing 20% more than it did before the storm. Last Tuesday, Chevron Corp announced that a production team at Leeds made the deepest successful well test in the Gulf of Mexico, potentially unearthing a reservoir of oil that could make it the top domestic source. A group led by Chevron on Tuesday raised expectations that it tapped into what could be one of the nation's biggest oil discovery in decades, releasing results from the long-awaited test of a Gulf of Mexico deepwater oil well. Chevron is the operator on the well, and they have a 50% stake in it, while Oklahoma City-based Devon Energy Corp, that's DVN on the market, and Norway's Statoil ASE, that's STO on the market, each own 25%. So you might look into those as an investment source. Now I want to cover some stocks that look good to me. I want to be brief today, but I want to discuss something that I think can help myself, so therefore I think it might help you. I'm not an investment advisor, and I don't advise you. I just tell you what looks good to me. 5 of the best performing stocks in industry performance last week were IRBL on the market, that's Enrob Tech Limited, Prime Aerospace Corp, that's EPEA on the market, Exonix Holdings, and that's XNN on the market, and then Homeland Security Network, XYSN, and then Safari Associates, SFAR. Let me give you a little take on those. IRBL, Enrob Tech, rose about 24% over their recent period, and Friday they were down 11.4%. Prime Aerospace Corp has risen over 36% in their recent period. Friday they were up over 7%. Exonix Holdings, they've risen over 14% in a recent period. Friday they were up 1.7%. And Homeland Security Network has risen over 27% in a recent period. Friday, they were up about 6.7%. And then Safari Associates, they have risen over 52% in a recent period. Friday, they were up over 37%. Now, let me give you a little take on each one of those. Enrob Tech Limited, they're in Las Vegas, Nevada. They provide engineering products and services for robotics. The company's certified to design, manufacture, and maintain electronic, optical, and electromechanical equipment, and they're a certified supplier to the Israel Defense Forces and the Israeli Air Force. Now, for Enrob Tech, as I said, Enrob Tech was up 24% over a recent period. They were down about 11% Friday, and even though it was down Friday, I like it for the next 3 months as far as for me. Again, I'm not advising you, I'm just telling you what looks good to me. I think that we'll see between 55 and 70 on that particular stock. And that's cents, not dollars. Now, E-Prime Aerospace, I don't want to go into them. They were up 36% over a recent period. Friday, they were up 7%. And they're climbing steadily since August. But I don't like the way it looks. It's just my gut feeling. So I'm going to pass on that. For XNN, that's Exonix Holdings, as I said, they were up over 14% on a recent period. They were up about 1.7% Friday. XNN, I picked this a couple weeks ago for myself. I'm looking at my notes. I wrote down for my own notation to buy at 138 and sell at 160. And I passed on it because they do low volume. And it's not good to get in a stock, and if you have like 100,000 shares of that and you want to bail out, it's kind of tough doing it unless you do it like a block of 5,000 at a time. And of course, you're going to pay some commission on each one of those. Last Friday, it closed at 183. Now, I had told myself to sell it at 160. Last Friday, it closed at 183. And even though it's over the price I recommended for myself, I like it for the short term. By the way, the volume Friday was 145,000. And just to give you disclosure, they are a company that's close to me geographically. However, I didn't know this until a few days ago, and I don't even know anybody that works there, at least that I know of. Okay, and then on Homeland Security Network, that's HYSN on the market. Homeland Security, I don't like it, and I'm going to stay away from it, even though they've been up over 27% in a recent period, and they were up almost 7% for the day Friday. I'm staying away from it. As far as Safari Associates, they were up in a recent period over 52%, and Friday they were up 37% for the day. However, I think it may be breaking out, but it might be at the top, and for that reason I'm going to pass on it for what it's worth. All right, and then I think I've covered all those for you. Now for some new insight. Keep your eye out for the newest in wireless tech in computers and other mobile devices. It's also called Wireless MAN. The MAN stands for Metropolitan Area Network. There are different Wi-Fi equipment makers, and the top guns in the Wi-Fi field now are Aruba Networks out of Sunnyvale, California. That's Sunnyvale, California. Cisco Systems, they have two different divisions you might want to check out, Airspace and Aeronet. And then Colubris Networks from Waltham, Massachusetts, Extreme Networks, Santa Clara, California, Symbol Technologies, Holtzville, New York, Trapeze Networks, and they're from Pleasanton, California. Notice this, Cisco Systems recently acquired Airspace, which is a smart Wi-Fi company, and this technology is tremendous. There's so many people using wireless networks today and using the laptop computers, and the market's getting a little cluttered, but the mobile WiMAX will have a lot of area. It's not rated yet, but it will have a network for several kilometers, and so it's going to be the hot thing on the market. I'm just giving you that idea so you can plan for the future and kind of watch these stocks and different companies as you do research on them. And now for some extra cream on the pudding, a little Prince Handley tip. Rising oil prices are really helping the coal industry, and the coal industry is ascending so fast that production and infrastructure are not able to keep up with it. So what I'm doing, I'm keeping my eye on these two companies. Freight Car America. They make aluminum coal cars that are lighter and more efficient than steel. And Freight Car America is trading 12 times more than the expected 2006 earnings. Another company I'm looking at in that sector is Peabody Energy. They're the world's top coal miner. They own properties that have not been overworked, and they're going into coal gasification. And right now they're trading at 31 times their projected 2006 earnings. By the way, back to WiMAX. WiMAX was conceived to provide the same type of fast internet service afforded by DSL, cable modem, and even fiber optic systems. The standard hasn't been adopted yet, but when it is, it will have greater range, probably up to a few hundred kilometers. And now for world news, and particularly Israel. At least 25,000 demonstrators took part in an evening protest on last Shabbat in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square, demanding the establishment of a state commission of inquiry that will examine the government's handling of the war in the north. My advice to the military and to the government of Israel, don't get stuck in the situation that the United States of America was during Vietnam. We have to have leaders that'll let us win a war. In World War II, we had to win. I lost my brother. I lost my cousin. On every block or two, there was somebody there who had a relative in the war, a brother, a father, a cousin, a son. And you have to want to win. You have to have leaders that want to win and that more particularly see the reason for winning, not only now, temporally, but also for the future and ultimately eternally. And as I read a rabbi's comment last week, that if the Torah is for only some people, it isn't for anybody. Okay, the Torah is for everybody. So's the Tanakh, so's the Brit Hadashah. The Bible is God's message for us. Live by it, learn by it, and love by it. Now, the event where the protesters were was organized by IDF reservist groups who had been demanding action, including high-level resignations from cabinet ministers in order to correct what they see as failures in strategic and logistical planning. It hindered the IDF's ability to wage the war, and the Movement for Quality Government also joined the reservists in organizing the event. Demonstrators from various organizations, including the Meretz Party, carried signs calling for Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, Defense Minister Amir Peretz, and IDF Chief of Staff Major General Dan Halutz to resign. They said, "You didn't deliver the goods. The nation demands leaders who can win," reads one sign. Another echoes a sentiment demanding Olmert go home. Some signs focused on the Commission of Inquiry itself. One, carried by protesters who came all the way from Kiryat Shmona, predicted that out of the north shall break forth the investigation. That was really a play on the words from the prophet Jeremiah, evil coming out of the north. Another demanded a real investigation, while a third wondered, what do you have to hide? And some estimated that crowd as high as 40,000 demonstrators. Police estimates gave the figure at 25,000. Even so, a lot of organizers insisted that many religious demonstrators were delayed due to Shabbat, and more were coming from the north and south of the country. The protest came about a week after thousands gathered in the same spot to rally in support of the 3 IDF soldiers held captive by Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, some good news, right straight from Israel. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is donating some NIS $10 million to the poorest of Israel's school children to help them purchase supplies for the school year. Our donors understand that Israel just had a war, that wars cost money, that Israel has to prepare for future wars, and that this leaves a vacuum in social spending. That was a quote from the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews founder and president, Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein. He told the Jerusalem Post last week, adding that the donation was meant just to help people get on their feet following the fighting. The fellowship, by the way, the IFCJ, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, was founded in 1982 to serve as a way for evangelical Christians in the U.S. who back Israel. 450,000 evangelical Christians write out more than 4,000 checks a day, contributing some $40 million, or NIS $175 million a year, to projects that help Israel's poor people. The latest Start of the School Year project will give some 40,000 of Israel's poorest school children NIS 250 worth of school supplies. That's about $57 US. The recipients will be chosen by school principals with whom the IFCJ has worked closely in the past and who are seen as least able to determine the need. And to ascertain that the funds donated reach their intended recipient, the IFCJ operates according to a checks and balance system. 50% of the funds are transferred immediately, and then there's a follow-up by the organization determines whether they were used appropriately, and only then will the organization provide the rest of the money. The donations will be distributed in secret so as not to stigmatize the children by showing they're needy, Eckstein said. And it's a tremendous organization. I myself am familiar with them and have worked with them in different things. And I tell you, that's a wonderful thing to see Christians and Jews working together to help Israel and to help people of all kinds. Now, I had promised to tell you about some land that Israel is going to possess. I'm going to tell you about the real miracles in the Israeli-Middle East conflict. In one of our podcasts, we mentioned Isaiah chapter 11, verses 12 to 16. We read a description of the war that will happen before Mashiach comes to earth again, the second time. The first 11 verses tell us about Messiah's return and his rule of peace on earth. Verses 12 to 16 cannot happen in that chapter in Isaiah 11 during the time of Messiah's reign, because his reign is characterized by peace. Another distinctive feature of this prophecy in verses 12 to 16 of Isaiah chapter 11 is that the war described therein has not happened historically. A war between Israel and probably all of the Middle East will happen, not just bordering Arab states like Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. The scripture says the Jews will fly down upon the shoulder of the Philistines or the Palestinians to the west. In context, Israel will strike against Egypt and Iraq, ancient Assyria, and plunder the people of the east. Israel will control these nations, and evidently their wealth as a result of the plundering. Etymologically, the people of the east include the Arab nations of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, and others. And it's very evident here in this passage that Israel will control the east bank of Jordan, Ammon, Moab, Edom. This happened in Joshua's time. It has not happened since the days of Ishawahu or Isaiah. This is a future prophecy that will happen. You might wonder how this will happen. Just recently, Israel's once again invaded Lebanon as a result of the action by Hezbollah terrorist group. How can Israel control several Arab Muslim nations with 80 million Arabs against him? The answer is Jehovah Nissi, the Lord our banner. It will be a supernatural conquest, like when Israel came up out of Egypt from the bondage of Pharaoh. Yes, and if you and I are believers, then we believe in these things. We believe in Yahweh and in His holy word. We believe His prophecies in the Tanakh, the Old Testament. God is not some old man in a rocking chair. He is eternally young and powerful, full of love, and He loves you. And He's just in all His works. The God of Israel is the protector and the warrior of Israel. To fight against Israel is to fight against God, but you have to have leaders who want to win. Avram, Moshe, Joshua, Deborah, David, for whom God fought, all are witnesses of His delivering power over the nation and people who would try to subdue, oppress, and resist Jacob's seed line, Israel. Look at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 15 to 16. Verse 15 says, "The Lord will utterly destroy or dry up the tongue of the sea of Egypt. That is, He'll dry up the gulf of the Egyptian sea. With His mighty, scorching wind, He'll shake His fist over the Euphrates River. He will strike it, break it up in the 7 streams, and make men cross over dry shod or in sandals. Yahweh will cause to happen supernatural happenings in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, and in Assyria, which is present-day Syria and Iraq, and their individual inhabitants will be cognizant of the fact that an assault against Israel is not just a military assault, but it is a spiritual opposition, and that against God. The Arab Muslim nations and people will be aware that the one God, the God, is the God of Israel and not Allah. Isaiah tells us in verse 16 of chapter 11, there will be a highway for the remnant of His people who will be left from Assyria, that's modern Iraq and Syria, as it was for Israel in the day that he came up from the land of Egypt under Moses. And sometime in the future, I'll tell you how this will be. Listen, you have a tremendous week. Make some money. Love your family, love your neighbor, do unto your neighbor as you would want them to do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.